There are two sides to coming to terms with an idea that's uncomfortable, unpleasant, or frightening. One is the intellectual side, the facts, the logic, etc. The other is the emotional side. I'm making this video to address a few of the basic mathematical foundations for what I believe will be the greatest collapse in history. This video is a precursor and in fact a prerequisite for my next video, which will be attempting to get the message across on a more emotional level. Alright, so let's start with the basics. Fact number one. The U.S. imports about 66% of its oil. Now, this is common knowledge. Fact number two, 70% of that oil is used for transportation. Also common knowledge. Fact number three, the U.S. dollar is not backed by anything physical. It's backed by debt originating from the issuance of bonds. Fact number four, the U.S. debt, currently over $14 trillion, but growing, cannot be paid back. And the rest of the world knows this. Fact number five, oil is currently only sold on the global market in U.S. dollars, and this is due to a set of agreements between the U.S. and OPEC. However, this doesn't just affect OPEC. When Canada buys oil, they buy it in dollars. When France buys oil, they buy it in dollars. This particular situation is often referred to as the petrodollar status. Fact number six, the necessity to have dollars in order to purchase oil in the global market creates the demand for the dollar. And for anybody who would like to dispute this, please refer to fact number three. Fact number seven, the value of the dollar is directly tied to the demand for the dollar. Supply and demand, basic economics. The obvious conclusion is the petrodollar status which holds up the value of the dollar. Fact number eight, China and Russia just recently agreed to stop using the dollar in all their bilateral trade. This includes oil. Now when Saddam Hussein did the same thing, we invaded Iraq. But we can't invade China or Russia. Now all the facts that I've outlined here are simple, publicly accessible, verifiable. I'm not going to hold everybody's hand and take them out there to do their research. If you want to contest one of these specific ideas, you actually need to do the research yourself. Now the following are the conclusions that I draw from these facts. The United States will lose its petrodollar status. I don't know when, I don't know the exact date, but it's inevitable. When it does, the demand for the dollar will fall precipitously. And as demand drops, the value of the dollar will evaporate. This means hyperinflation. And once hyperinflation is fully underway, other countries will begin refusing to accept dollars for products that they export. This will happen very quickly. Now remember, U.S. imports 66% of its oil. And that oil is not going to keep coming in if exporters no longer accept U.S. dollars. And remember, we established 70% of all domestic oil consumption is used for transportation. So if you subtract that 66% from the 70%, you're left with about 4% left for transport in general. Now it's important to realize that when we say transport, it includes 18-wheelers and all sorts of supply chain transportation, which make up a considerable part of that 70%. In this country, food transport and agriculture are completely dependent on oil. And obviously you can't cut out food transport without causing starvation. Logical conclusion, you're not going to be able to get gasoline to drive your car. Nobody is. However, even cutting back all individual car usage to zero will not be enough to prevent catastrophe. And here's why. Agriculture as we currently practice it in the U.S. is completely dependent on a constant stream of inputs which require transportation, especially the animal industry. Take, for instance, a chicken farm. The farm normally gets deliveries of corn or other feedstocks on a regular basis. Almost no farms grow both the feed and raise the animals. The loss of the petrodollar would lead to astronomical price increases for that transport, and that will translate into astronomical prices in the grocery store. And what you have to understand is this explosion in the cost of transport will affect every single other industry. And as the cost of doing business skyrockets, unemployment will also skyrocket. Now, a large number of the states are already on the verge of bankruptcy. They're not going to be able to feed and house this massive influx of the unemployed. People will go hungry. And when people go hungry long enough, they get desperate. And they become very dangerous. Now, I'm not telling you this to scare you. But if you really understand it, it probably will. When I first came to terms with this, it was earth-shattering for me. And it's no exaggeration to say that I hardly slept for weeks. But at a certain point, you have to make a decision to put your fear aside and start getting ready. Some things we can't change, but some things we can. The trick is knowing the difference.
How you doing, guys? I already had the camera out because I just made my last video, and I remembered something that I was thinking about last week and wanted to make a quick video about, and that is a few items that you may not have ever thought of but may become very useful or very important if you were having to enter some kind of shit hit the fan or survival/preparedness scenario. Now remember, not all scenarios are end of the world stuff. In fact, most of them aren't, but that is a possibility, and some of these things may come in handy for any preparedness scenario, so you need to think long and hard about whether you have this stuff or not, because they come in handy. The first one is paper plates and plastic utensils and other disposable cookware and stuff like that, because if you were in like a power outage type scenario or a blizzard or something like that where you don't have normal utilities up and running, it may be a pain in the ass at the very least, or a waste of prime resources to try and wash dishes and stuff by hand. Not to mention it's a pain in the ass. For a while I used nothing but disposable dishes and silverware in my normal day-to-day life because I hated doing dishes so much. And if you had to like heat the water by a fire and stuff like that and scrub in a big, Rubbermaid tote or something to do your dishes, this may be a better way to do it, at least for a short-term scenario. For long-term, you definitely want to have a way to be able to clean dishes and stuff like that, but if your power's out for 2 weeks or something, you may just want to switch to the paper plates and plastic silverware and save yourself a lot of hassle and a lot of stinky, crusty dishes. So that's something to think about. Keep those on hand. The next would be aluminum foil. There is no more versatile way to cook things than with aluminum foil. And speaking of dishes, if you may want to line pans and stuff with aluminum foil, or you can cook directly in it, and it'll protect the thing from getting crusty with burnt food. You can just crumple up and throw it away, or you can cook on aluminum foil directly on like a fire grate or something like that. Very useful. Also useful to build impromptu Faraday cages if you need to. A lot of uses. Not a bad idea to have a roll or two of that stuff lying around the old homestead. Also, this is something that I don't think I've ever seen anyone bring up, and it's something that I definitely want to expand my preparations in this area. But you see a lot of people talking about communications with their friends or family and stuff, but I haven't seen anyone mention an ability to communicate with people who don't speak your language. And I don't think I got to tell anyone that in the United States right now, if you don't speak Spanish, first of all, or even a couple other languages, it would be very hard to communicate with a lot of people, especially if you're in certain areas of the country. One thing that I have is, when I got before I went overseas, was it's like a map almost. It folds out and it has a series of like flashcards on it that have different scenarios, different items, and you just point to different images on this as a means of communication. They got all sorts of stuff set up just for this purpose, and it's awesome. I mean, these were more oriented towards wartime situation where you can like pictures of bombs and stuff like that and like rebels and everything, but it wouldn't be that hard to make a set of flashcards that had different items on it, different pictures describing like barter and trade, and stuff like that, so you can communicate with people who don't speak English. And that's something that'd be really easy to take care of, and very useful if you ever needed it. Another one would be ways to dry your clothes. I've seen a lot of people who have, and I myself have, like a hand plunger for washing clothes, and I've made sure I got the containers and all that. But if you're not careful, you may not have a way to dry them. If you don't have a clothesline or something set up, and also have clothespins or drying rack, now's the time to do it. Don't wait until your dryer craps out, or you have no power, or the shit has hit the fan to realize that you have to fashion or build a clothesline or a clothes rack. Just get it now. There's no time like the present. Another one, this goes back to the cooking and aluminum foil, is a grill grate that you can use on an open fire. You can use one from your grill if you have a grill, but it may not be big enough. And if you plan on having to, as a contingency, to maybe have to cook over an open flame, you need something to cook on. And you can improvise ways like this if you have to, with sticks and everything, especially if you have the aluminum foil, you can cook directly on the coals, but that's not always going to be how you want to do it. So it's not hard to go get a metal grate, and that's sized enough to fit over a decent sized fire. So something to think about. You can even get some that have little legs for camping and stand up on their own, or you can fashion anything that it can sit on. That's not important. It's easy to fashion something for it to sit on. There's not a lot of things you can substitute for a metal grate to cook on a big fire. So those are just a couple things that you guys may not have thought of, but they could come in a lot of handy, very useful if the time comes. So keep prepping, guys. Let me know what you think. If you have a couple items that you think would be good, post them in the comments. And don't post stuff like, this is for stuff that you may not have thought of. So there's no reason to mention things like first aid kits and guns and food. Hopefully anyone watching my videos knows that they should be prepared with a little bit of food, first aid kit, and self-defense. So in this video comments, I want you guys to put stuff that you might not have thought of, and but they could come in handy. So let me know what you guys think, and I'll talk to you later.
I was afraid the government would respond to the financial crisis by doing more of the same policies that caused it, which is more deficit spending, more cheap money, more central banking and central planning. And as a result, I think the U.S. economy is now poised for a much bigger collapse. I think that what's coming is a sovereign debt crisis and a currency crisis that will make the financial crisis of '08 look like, the proverbial Sunday school picnic.
Is it something that's affecting the economy right now?
Oh, absolutely. The fiscal cliff specifically is one of the major ways in which the slow recovery that we have could be completely derailed. Hard landing in China, euro collapsing, problems in the Middle East, and fiscal cliff is probably paramount in that area.
As a matter of policy, as opposed to an apocalyptic way
And the
to
most
get there.
important price is interest rates, which have to go up.
That is
but
the
no
price.
one wants to let them go up because the banks will fail.
We currently have no price integrity in any asset in America.
And we're on the precipice of collapse. That's
right.
where we are.
So
This system is in collapse, and it's unbelievable, and most people don't even see what's going on. If you watch CNBC, if you actually pay attention to the U.S. media, they will always tell you there's green shoots or it's going to be a recovery. There's no chance of that.
You don't think there are any signs of that?
It's not possible. We're in the last days of this financial system in the U.S. This is Zimbabwe. When it starts to collapse, it's going to happen very fast. If people don't start to wake up to what's going on, they're going to get hurt in this collapse. But this is where it's going now, that we have to now just get as far away from the U.S. and from the Western world because this collapse is going to be messy.
We've got to ask ourselves, why are the feds preparing for a war against Americans? Why have they bought now more than 2 billion bullets, all kinds of arms and ammunition, and now more than 2,700 tanks to patrol in America and keep order? We're told it's because they love us. We're told it's to keep the peace and to increase safety. But of course, we also know from Army documents, from Homeland Security reports, and a lot of other information that it's really to occupy America and prepare for a civil unrest and a total economic collapse that will include gun confiscation.
The rise of the warrior cop. So, what do you mean?
Our cops are getting increasingly like soldiers. They're being dressed like soldiers, they're being armed like soldiers, they're sent out in the streets told they're fighting a war. And when you do that, we shouldn't be surprised when we see some of the results we've seen at the lead-in, where they start treating American citizens more like enemy combatants than citizens with rights.
Meaning, mostly you're talking about these SWAT team raids.
Over the last probably 20 years, there's been about a 1,500% increase in the number of SWAT raids in the U.S.
Often is 10 or 20 guys dressed in black, heavily armed.
I mean, they look like a military squad. I mean, they look like a unit that would invade a village in Iraq looking for insurgents.
Speaking of the police state, which 9/11 ushered in, a 16-year-old is questioned by FBI officials over a YouTube video that he uploaded. According to Justin Hallman, a 16-year-old, after having uploaded a YouTube video which highlighted how America was slipping into a police state, he was visited by FBI officials.
Police state.
Ask one of them why they're here.
What's up, nigga? Police state. Police state, man. Police state. 4th of July. Here's our video. M16s.
Because we don't live in a police state, sir. Martial law has not been established in this country. Open the door, sir. He's got his hand up.
You're gonna kick my door. You kicked my door down. You kicked my door down.
Get on the ground.
You kicked my door down.
Yes, we did. Get on the ground.
No, you have no right to be in here. You have no right to be in here. You have no right to be here. You don't. You have no right to be in here. Do not touch her. You are assaulting her.
Yeah, I didn't open up the door. I would open up. Now they're barging in my door for one reason.
Down on the ground, down on the ground, down on the ground, down! Down, down, down to your hands! Hands, come to me, come to me, come to me! Don't move! Please, don't move! Please, don't move! Please, don't move!
If what we saw in response to bombs was that, what will the response be in the wake of something bigger? Is that when we'll see martial law take effect across the country? And more importantly, will people just accept it entirely out of fear?
It was never meant that we would have this gigantic police force from the federal government. I mean, we had martial law up there, FBI and all these agents coming in, closing things down, going to people's houses.
The police state is staring us in the eye, and it's getting more and more imposed upon us and more imposed on society every day. More and more people are waking up faster and faster and faster.
I think it could very well come to that based on the things that are happening in the news, and we're seeing, the collapse of our economy, so many different things happening.
I have spoken with one federal agent, and the information succinctly boiled down is this. There is an event coming, Steve, in the very near-term future that is going to affect the United States of America to its very soul. That what is being planned as you and I are on the air tonight, and what has been coming together into that old term, the perfect storm, is literally brewing right over our heads. It is and includes military maneuvers in the United States, military actions that are forthcoming, and that will be so deep and so penetrating that the United States will never be the same.
Who have heard about the NSA spying on us all and think, no big deal. I'm not a terrorist, so I have nothing to worry about. Think again. Because we are all potential terrorists, according to the American government.
You can't just do these kind of things. And this one is not only repealing the principles of liberty, but it's destroying the Constitution.
All of these invasions of our personal privacy under the guise of protecting us, they're just wrong. And it's no longer about keeping us safe. This is about keeping us safely under the government's eye. And it is clear the government is watching all the time.
Oil looks higher. Gold looks higher, currencies look weaker.
More about this currency crisis you see erupting. What does that assume about what's going to happen to the dollar?
Well, it assumes that the dollar will utterly get destroyed and become virtually worthless. I don't know how that inevitably resolves itself. It may resolve itself in some type of a global currency crisis. And then if the global currency crisis unfolds, then inevitably you get I guess an alignment under a global world government, a new global currency, and a new world order.
Growing debate in Washington following reports that some U.S. senators are now considering an immigration bill that would force all U.S. workers to carry around biometric ID cards. Well, it is an idea that is now raising some serious concerns among privacy advocates.
Through the advancing market of biometrics, technology that uses physiological and behavioral recognition to identify people. A system touted as a national security necessity is being used to build a database where the biometric identity of millions of Americans will be gathered and stored.
We really need to attack this in a comprehensive kind of way, not some knee-jerk reaction like sticking something in someone's finger to verify who they are and whether or not they can be employed in this country.
The U.S. Department of Homeland Security has been buying up massive amounts of ammunition. Americans are wondering why.
Do you think this is a sign that they're preparing for some sort of mass civil unrest?
If you look at what the Department of Homeland Security has been purchasing over the last year, it comes out to like 1.6 billion rounds of ammunition, more than 7,000 fully automatic assault weapons, 2,700 MRAP type vehicles, and now drones. Those are instruments of war. Department of Homeland Security's, who are they going to fight a war against?
Would I participate in assisting the feds coming into states and going into homes and taking everybody's gun away? And I said, I would not be a part of something like that. I said, one of the reasons is I wouldn't want to get shot, because the American people are only going to put up with so much before they push back. And I said, if the feds tried to do that, disarm this country, I said, you would see an uprising and maybe a version of the Second American Revolution.
the apocalypse!